Okay, we're going to be tying a variation of the Sparkle Minnow. A great pattern I've been using since probably for the last 10 years. A gentleman named Greg Bricker from Montana showed this pattern to me on the Yellowstone River on a float trip, and ever since it's been, again, one of my favorite streamer patterns. This is a slight variation. We're going to use some influences from several of my friends, some of the guys from Fly Fish Food, and then also a gentleman named Justin Probanik. But still, it's a Sparkle Minnow. There's nothing incredibly different, just a few modifications and just some adjustments I like to use when tying this fly. Again, it's more for me than anyone else, but I just want to share this variation with you. To get started, we're going to be using a size 4 Partridge Predator hook. You can use any streamer hook. This has just become one of my favorite for streamers, for trout. You definitely lose a little bit, you sacrifice a little bit of the strength of this hook point for the finer wire, but I think you get a better hook set on a lot of occasions compared to the incredibly heavy gauge wire you will find on some of the other streamer hooks. And when you're fishing for trout, I don't think you really need an exceptionally heavy gauge wire, at least where I fish and for the trout I go after. I don't catch big fish. Now, for the tail, we're going to take our thread and we're going to wind it down. The other thing I just did is I took about 8 wraps of 25 thousandths lead wire, laid on the hook shank, and just shoved it up underneath the cone to give a little bit more weight, to give it more of a jigging movement, and then also just to help lock in that cone from sliding back. The tail is going to be two-tone. When you look at most of your major bait fish, sculpins, they usually have a lighter underbelly, a darker top, and I'm going to try and maintain that theme with most of my streamers. So I like contrast, I like two-tone streamer patterns. So we're going to do a white section of Marabou underneath. And then for this color scheme, this is imitating, or at least I believe it's imitating, a black-nosed dace, one of our common bait fish here in Pennsylvania. We're going to do a light olive and lay that right on top. Here, we're going to stack this. We're going to do a pinch technique. When I'm trying to stack material, I'm just going to make one loop, 2 loops, and pull straight down. That's going to pull that material right on top of itself. I'm going to wind back, snug that down. The other point I want to mention, when you're tying with Marabou, one of the tips, and you get inspired by so many folks. There's a guy named Charlie who's also goes by the name of Picket Pin. He's from Ohio but fishes a lot up in Michigan, and this was just a little tip he gave me when tying with Marabou. When you pull out a plume of Marabou like you see right here, there's a stem that runs all the way up to the Marabou. And what this stem does, it obviously holds all these little fibers in place, but what this also does is almost like a spine, but it kind of stiffens up this Marabou. One of the things he told me is that when you are tying this in with a tip, just take your scissors and just trim that spine off. Then you can tie that in, and what that does, it just gives that feather a lot more flexibility, a little bit more movement. So I just want to kind of give a shout out to Charlie Picket Pin for helping me, for giving me that tip a number of years ago. For the flash, we're going to use a crinkle mirror gold flash made by Orvis. Again, the idea of a chef versus a cook. This is what I have available. This is some of my favorite flash material, but if you have something of a Flashabou sort, any flash is going to work. If the truth was to be told, this fly already has enough flash, or will have enough flash built into the front end. We're going to tie this flash directly, like a lateral scale, right off to the side. We're going to do a pinch technique, but we're going to do a pinch technique off to the side, create a loop, and then pull straight towards us. Make a couple loops forward. We're going to try and marry that right onto the side of the Marabou. We're going to wrap our thread forward, and then we're going to fold back the other side towards me and do the same thing. Wrap back. Again, I'm going to wrap back, get that in place here, and then apply pressure straight back towards me, getting that flash, hopefully, to stand directly on the side, almost kind of splitting the difference between the light olive and the white. For the body, This is something that we can use. It's called a kind of a streamer brush modification that I got from the Fly Fish Food guys. But we're going to create our own streamer brush using a combination of polar chenille and a schlappen feather. And for this color scheme, we're just going to use a silver large polar chenille. We're going to tie this down. So instead of doing hackle, then the chenille, and then winding the chenille, and then winding the hackle over the chenille, what we're going to do is we're going to twist the two together using a gator clip from Loon. And this is going to help us kind of create and twist these fibers together, almost like a multi-filament material. This technique takes a little bit more time, but I really believe it adds a lot of durability to your pattern. So we're going to take schlappen, we're going to tie this in tip first, and with schlappen there's a natural taper, very thin to longer on the rear. So what I want to do is I want to tie in tip first, right alongside my UV polar chenille, kind of winding that down, making sure that's nice and tight. We're going to wrap this forward all the way up to the cone. Now to get started, we're just going to take our schlappen and just lay this right on top of our chenille. We're going to take our gator clip right here, and we're going to just hook that in there. And this is like a dubbing loop twister, but we have this attachment clip that we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to combine the hackle and the polar chenille together. We're going to twist, then we're going to take Velcro as we're doing this. Kind of just pull out some of these fibers. You can use a dubbing brush, dog brush, whatever you want. But you can see how now I can pull those fibers out. This just creates a really cool looking bug, but I think more importantly, it adds a lot of durability, because so often when you just add that hackle, and you wind the hackle around on the bugger, traditional bugger, and if you have a trout that hits that, or if part of that hackle stem comes undone, the whole fly comes undone unless you do a reinforcement. So by just combining these two with that gator clip, gives it a cool look, but also I think it just adds a lot of durability. And when you're talking about streamer patterns, these are patterns that you're fishing on heavy gauge wire or heavy gauge tippet. You're not going to be losing too many of these flies. And as a result, this is where I will definitely go the extra few feet, or maybe in this case a mile, just add durability. And every time I'm wrapping, I'm just going to make one wrap right in front of the next, and if I need to, I can take my Velcro, just kind of fold that back, pull out those fibers, and wrap all the way forward. Giving that fly a nice full effect. This is just a fun fly. You can drift it, but I like to swim this fly with an active retrieve. Go right up, almost up to the cone. And we're leaving a gap, just a small little cavity between our dubbing brush and the cone. And I'll explain why here in just a second. Just make one or two more wraps on the front side. Take our Velcro brush, just kind of comb that out. Okay. Okay, now for the wing on this fly, we're going to use a hairline ripple ice. And for this black nose dace color, we're going to use a copper color. We're going to pull a little hank of this out, split the difference. This is where we're going to be tying this in, kind of dead center. These are longer strands, sometimes like 6 inches or so. So we're going to go just about halfway. Pull out any loose fibers on either end. All we're going to do is we're going to lay this wing laying down towards the tail, and then we're going to fold it back onto itself. But this is where you need to have a little bit of a cavity right here, where I can take my brush or my thread and just take that and just kind of cinch that right in that groove. Right there, one good tight wrap. And we're going to make another tight wrap right here and just really lock that in. Using a 140 denier, we can really apply some torque here. really getting that to bite down. And we're just going to take our scissors, just trim. We're going to do our whip finish. One of the things I'll do with a whip finish, this is, again, I've been inspired by so many people, and I think you have to give credit out to where you learn a lot of this. I learned this tip, it's called a super glue whip finish, but I learned this watching an old Dave Whitlock tying video back in the 90s when there was actually VHS tapes. I think he was tying one of his sculpin patterns, but just gonna lay just some super glue right on that. And all we're going to do now, instead of doing a whip finish, we can just come right in here, just make a couple wraps. Pull that down tight, and there, especially when you're working in tight quarters, I could have easily used the whip finish, but if you find yourself really tight on space, you can just do that super glue whip finish, and boom, it's locked in. Taking your pair of scissors, and we're just going to trim this at a slight low angle. Kind of just following the contour, the Marabou. But right there is just a cool little variation. And this ice wing variation was a guy named Justin Probanik shared with me a couple years ago as well. So again, just being inspired by guys like the Fly Fish Food guys for the dubbing, for the streamer brush, Justin Probanik for showing me this ice wing, or the ripple ice wing for this fly, and then also that super glue whip finish that I learned from Dave Whitlock so many years ago. So again, this is just one of my favorite flies. This is a single hook point. You can easily turn this into an articulated fly, as I often will if I'm fishing bigger water for bigger fish. But there it is, the Sparkle Minnow, slightly updated version for 2020, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.